Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, I invite you to step quietly into a place you already know, a place where the wind hums with magic and time itself sometimes takes a thoughtful pause. The tale you are about to hear is soft, mysterious, and gently woven through the corridors of the world's most enchanting castle, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. But this time, we aren't headed toward grand spells or dramatic duels. No, this is a quieter story, one that unfolds under stars, in the whisper of broomsticks, and in the echo of cheers that seem to come not just from one moment, but from many. Tonight, we will wander into a gentle mystery, a Quidditch match that, for reasons even Professor Flitwick found puzzling, decided to play itself again and again and again. But don't worry, this story holds no danger, no loud crashes or frantic chases. It is a story of curiosity, of a quiet, magical glitch, and of a peaceful evening that turned into something just a little more curious. The setting? Well, let's begin where most enchanted evenings do, in the heart of the Hogwarts grounds. The Quidditch pitch stands still in the twilight, the tall hoops casting long shadows over the soft, dew-kissed grass. Lanterns along the stadium walkways flicker to life one by one, their glow warm and steady like a heartbeat. The air smells faintly of old leather and enchanted polish, the kind used to shine broomsticks passed down through generations. High above, the sky is painted in the softest shades of lavender and silver. The moon, only half full, rests comfortably in the clouds, as if it too is listening in. Somewhere in the distance, the Black Lake stirs, not from waves, but from the sighs of sleepy creatures beginning to drift into dreams. Inside the castle, the common rooms are quieting down. House elves hum lullabies to the kitchens. Even the portraits along the grand staircase yawn in unison, their evening stories already retold. This, dear listener, is where we begin. With a sky calm as a whisper and a pitch waiting beneath it. A match once played, ready to begin again. If you find comfort in the cozy corners of Hogwarts, in stories whispered beneath enchanted ceilings, or mysteries that stretch just long enough to carry you into sleep, this one is for you. And if you're enjoying this tale already, feel free to gently tap the like button, maybe subscribe for more sleepy Hogwarts tales, and return anytime your dreams need a bit of magic. Now, let's take our first step into this calm little mystery, the Quidditch match that replayed itself. The soft creak of a wooden bench echoed quietly beneath the stars as Harry Potter sat beside his best friends, Hermione Granger and Sir Ron Weasley, just outside the Gryffindor common room tower. The night was gentle, the kind of evening when laughter didn't need to be loud and stories didn't need to rush. It was just the three of them, wrapped in scarves, watching the moonlight dance over the distant Quidditch pitch. Feels like something's humming out there tonight, Ron murmured, squinting toward the distant stadium lights still glowing faintly in the dark. Hermione tilted her head. The pitch has been oddly lit since supper. I passed by earlier and I could have sworn I heard cheering. Harry's brow furrowed softly, but not with worry, with wonder. "I thought I imagined it too," he said. "It sounded like a match in full swing." Their voices were low, as though they didn't want to disturb the air. There was no urgency, only gentle curiosity and the familiar warmth of being in each other's company. These three, Harry, the boy who lived with the weight of history behind his name, Hermione, the clever heart of their trio, and Ron, loyal, funny, and endlessly brave, had seen so much magic unfold in their years at Hogwarts. But tonight, they weren't chasing Horcruxes or dodging curses. They were simply three friends sitting beneath the stars, following a quiet, magical thread that tugged gently at their thoughts. "Let's take a walk to the pitch," Hermione suggested, her tone light but sparkling with the kind of curiosity only she could carry so elegantly. "Now?" Ron yawned, stretching his arms. "It's nearly curfew." Harry smiled, standing and pulling his cloak a little tighter. "We'll be quick. Just a peek. Maybe it's just the wind playing tricks." Ron grumbled, but he stood too. "All right, but if we get caught, I'm blaming the both of you, especially Hermione. She always talks me into these things." Hermione gave a playful nudge, and they began walking quietly along the path that led from the courtyard down the sloping lawn toward the pitch. The grass whispered beneath their feet. The air had a sleepy stillness to it, as though Hogwarts itself was watching them fondly, letting them have one more little adventure before the castle drifted off to sleep. Their silhouettes moved slowly in the moonlight. No mischief tonight, no danger, only quiet hearts, a flickering mystery, and three friends who had grown used to following magic wherever it gently called them. And so, side by side, they made their way toward the Quidditch pitch, where something old and odd was waiting, not loudly, not urgently, but patiently, just like a memory that refuses to fade. And with each step they took, the breeze carried a sound, soft, echoing, and strange. The distant whoosh of brooms in the air, though the pitch was empty. The Quidditch pitch stood in soft silence as the trio reached its edge, the great wooden stands casting long, sleepy shadows in the moonlight. A faint breeze swept across the grass, carrying with it a subtle scent of broom polish, warm stadium snacks, and something more elusive, something like memory. Harry paused near the outer gate, his eyes slowly sweeping across the familiar grounds. "There's no one here," he whispered, though his tone was more thoughtful than surprised. "But doesn't it feel like someone was?" Hermione walked ahead, her boots crunching lightly on the path, and leaned over the railing to look out onto the field. The tall goalposts rose against the night sky like watchful sentinels, but they seemed to shimmer faintly, ever so faintly, as though touched by enchantment. She turned slowly to Harry. "The grass is pressed down in places. Broom tracks?" Ron joined them and squinted toward the center of the pitch. "I swear I just saw something like a glint of red and gold robes, then it vanished." For a moment, all three stood completely still, and then, softly, unmistakably, they heard it. A whistle. It came from nowhere, and yet it echoed from everywhere, faint and far away, like the memory of a game played long ago. Then, the low murmur of a crowd rippled through the air. Not shouting, not roaring, just a gentle wave of sound, like ghosts politely applauding. Harry leaned forward. Tell me you heard that. I did, Hermione breathed. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were wide with wonder. It's not someone playing tricks. This is magic, old magic. As if in answer, the pitch began to shimmer. It began with the air itself growing denser, as though time had decided to slow its breath. A faint golden glow appeared around the stadium's edges, curling softly like morning mist. And then, like a dream fading into reality, translucent figures began to emerge, players on broomsticks, robed and flying, but slightly out of focus. They weren't there, not physically, but they were real in some way deeper than sight. I recognize those jerseys, Harry said, barely above a whisper. That's Gryffindor, from 2 years ago. Wait, I was playing that match. Ron leaned against the railing, squinting at the scene. You're right, I remember this one. It was the match against Ravenclaw. That save you made near the third post. Blimey, I thought you'd fall off your broom. And there it was, a ghostly version of Harry on his nimbus, diving toward the pitch in perfect silence, stopping the phantom quaffle just inches from the ring. The move played out as if on a loop, smooth and continuous. Then it shimmered, rewound, and began again. Hermione stared, awestruck. It's not just a memory, it's a recording? Like a magical replay? Harry nodded slowly, his face bathed in the pale glow of the scene. But how? There's no known spell that does this, not in this way. The crowd in the stands began to materialize too, just faint shapes, silhouettes clapping, scarves waving softly in a breeze that didn't exist. Their cheers were muted, like a lullaby, distant and soothing. The scene unfolded with a rhythm that lulled the mind into stillness. Ron blinked slowly. This is kind of relaxing. Hermione stepped back, eyes fixed on the illusion. What if this is the pitch remembering? What if some strong moment of emotion or magic left an imprint, like a pensive but tied to a place rather than a person? They sat on the lower steps of the stands, the night wrapping gently around them as the match continued to replay, again and again, each loop ending with the same victorious dive, the same calm eruption of cheers. No danger, no tension, just the peaceful replaying of something joyful. As they sat, lulled by the dreamy rhythm of the looping match, Hermione pulled out a small leather notebook and began to jot notes by wand light. I've read about emotional residue in magical environments, usually in places like battlefields or hospitals, but never something like this. It's beautiful. Harry's voice was soft, almost sleepy. It's like the pitch wants to remember something good, something worth keeping. Just then, the loop paused. The figures hung frozen in the air for a heartbeat, the ghost Harry suspended mid-dive, the crowd holding invisible breath. And then, it rewound. But this time, instead of playing the same loop, it began a different match. The jerseys changed colors, Hufflepuff versus Slytherin. The players were new, figures none of them recognized. Some wore robes that looked decades old. The movement was slower, almost theatrical. The quaffle arced through the air, caught in a lazy spiral by a tall chaser with wind-swept hair. The brooms dipped and glided, choreographed like a ballet. "Look at their robes," Hermione said, sitting forward. "They're not modern at all. That style was popular in the 1950s. The match played out in perfect silence. The new crowd, too, was different, dressed in older fashions. Their cheers whisper soft, like forgotten memories. This match, too, ended with a shimmering fade, and the loop began again. "This pitch," Harry whispered, "has been holding on to its favorite memories." They stayed like that for what felt like hours, watching the soft procession of matches, some from recent years, others clearly older than Dumbledore himself. One featured a team with broomsticks, so primitive they looked hand-carved. Another had a golden snitch the size of a walnut. Each time the match ended, the air shimmered and another would take its place, like flipping through the pages of a photo album that remembered not pictures, but movement, sound, and feeling. It was Ron who noticed it first. "Oi, do you see that?" he said, pointing toward the goalpost. A figure was watching, not a ghostly player, not part of the loop, a single, still shape in the shadows of the far goalpost, cloaked, quiet, and unmoving. The figure wasn't part of the memory. It was something present. Harry stood slowly. The pitch felt different now, still calm, still peaceful, but with a question hanging in the air, like the note of a song that hadn't yet resolved. The figure stepped forward, and the moment it did, the entire loop shimmered and paused. All the ghostly players froze midair. Even the breeze seemed to hold still, but there was no fear, just silence. Deep, magical silence. The cloaked figure raised a hand slowly, not threateningly, but almost in greeting. And then, like morning fog under sunlight, it began to fade. Its form dissolved into stardust, trailing upward into the sky, vanishing into the constellations above. And just like that, the loops resumed. But this time, it was their own match, the Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw game, back again, playing softly from the start. Ron exhaled, almost chuckling. Well, that was odd. Hermione closed her notebook, her voice filled with awe. Not odd. Enchanted. This place. It's a keeper of time, of joy, maybe even of people. Harry nodded, smiling faintly. It's been remembering us, and we've remembered it. And they stayed just a while longer, beneath the stars, wrapped in the warmth of friendship and the soft glow of magical memory. They let the looping match soothe them. No danger, no battles, just magic, gentle, patient, and alive in the heart of Hogwarts. A memory that didn't want to fade. A story that asked only to be seen again. As the days gently moved forward, the hush of discovery gave way to a deep, quiet curiosity. The students, once startled by the magical ticking of the old clock, now found themselves wrapped in a subtle enchantment. The atmosphere within the schools shifted ever so slightly, not with urgency, but with a sense that something, somewhere, was waiting to be noticed. The library became their sanctuary. Harry, Hermione, and Ron found themselves spending hours beneath the tall, dust-covered shelves of forgotten spellbooks and archived enchantments. The clock was always on their minds, even when it didn't tick. Hermione had been particularly attentive to its periods of silence, jotting them down, observing how its tick would return only when someone in its presence was feeling something unspoken. One calm morning, as mist rolled gently along the outer edges of the castle walls and sunlight filtered in soft golden beams through the arched windows, the group returned to the old clock room, determined to watch, listen, and wait. Hermione brought with her a strange little device she had found in the library's restricted section, a time sentiment tracer, a peculiar magical instrument designed to pick up echoes of emotionally charged magic left behind in objects. It was rarely used, since most magical items in Hogwarts already brimmed with countless memories and interference. But this clock, they had reason to believe, was different. Ron, still skeptical but ever loyal, leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You really think it's going to work this time?" he asked, watching Hermione carefully adjust the tracer's dials. Hermione nodded. "It has to. The clock reacts to us. I know it does, and this will prove it." They all gathered around, and for a moment, silence fell once again. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, very slowly, the tracer began to glow, a warm, silvery hue that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. A low chime echoed from the clock, not a tick. A chime. It was soft, melodic, like the sound of a lullaby carried on wind. The trio looked at one another in astonishment. Then the hands of the clock began to move, but not in time with the real world. Backwards, slowly, smoothly. Harry stepped closer. It's not turning time back, is it?" But Hermione was already scribbling notes furiously. "No, it's replaying something someone felt in this room. It's showing us an echo." Before their eyes, the room began to shimmer. The colors around them softened into dreamlike hues. Dust motes glowed like tiny stars. The windows no longer looked out on the present-day grounds of Hogwarts, but onto a garden that no longer existed. A young girl sat alone by the window, cradling a journal. Her robes were old, much older than any student's today. Her presence was ethereal, translucent. She turned the pages slowly, and though they could not hear her, they knew she was speaking to herself. She was sad. The feeling rolled over them like a wave, not overwhelming, but deeply poignant. This girl, whoever she was, had once sat in this very room, watching the same clock, longing for something lost. The chime echoed again, and the vision faded. Ron whispered, "Did we just see a memory?" Hermione nodded solemnly. "Not just any memory, an emotional imprint. The clock is tied to feelings, strong ones, grief, love, longing. That's what winds it." Harry turned to the clock. "Then that means every time it ticks, it's because someone nearby is remembering something they lost?" Hermione looked at him thoughtfully. "Or someone they miss, or something they wish they could change." The revelation sat with them quietly. Suddenly, the air in the room shifted again. The time sentiment tracer, still softly glowing, began to spin in place, faster and faster. A compartment in the base of the clock creaked open. Inside was a letter, old but untouched by time. Harry reached for it carefully, unfolding the parchment. The handwriting was elegant, written in faded ink. To the one who hears what others forget, this clock holds what cannot be spoken aloud. But if you feel its rhythm, you carry the same burden I once did, a heart not ready to say goodbye. No name, no date, just that quad message. The three stood in silence, absorbing the words. Ron exhaled. So it's not just a clock, it's a keeper of unspoken goodbyes. Hermione closed her eyes, voice soft. And maybe, in listening, we help carry them forward. Maybe that's what it needs. They didn't fully understand it, but that was the nature of soft mysteries. They weren't meant to be solved in haste or logic. They were meant to be felt, gently. They left the room quietly that day, but from that point on, whenever they passed the hallway that led to the clock room, they paused. Sometimes they heard a tick. Sometimes they heard a chime. And sometimes there was only silence, but even that felt like it held meaning. Each of them, in their own way, had felt the press of time in life, losses they couldn't speak of, moments they wished had lasted just a little longer. Now they knew they weren't alone. The clock had heard those feelings long before them, and it would keep listening long after. The days at Hogwarts drifted onward with their usual rhythm. Lessons in the greenhouses, warm meals in the Great Hall, quiet study sessions in the common rooms. But for Harry, Hermione, and Ron, there was now an undercurrent that moved gently beneath everything. The mysterious clock, the letter left in its base, and the soft chimes of emotional echoes had changed how they walked through the castle's ancient corridors. Every hallway, every creaky floorboard seemed to hold a secret just below the surface. Hermione, ever diligent, had taken to researching the clock's history. Late into the evening hours, she sat by candlelight, tracing old floor plans, piecing together mentions from forgotten textbooks, even speaking softly with the portraits of long-retired professors in the library's enchanted gallery. I think it was installed just after the First Wizarding War, she murmured one night in the common room, her voice as gentle as the firelight flickering across the walls. But the girl we saw in the vision, her robes were much older than that. I think this clock existed far before it was moved to that room. Ron looked up from his half-eaten treacle tart. So it's been quietly keeping time on feelings for, what, centuries? Hermione nodded slowly, and Hogwarts let it. Let it stay hidden, not as a tool, but maybe as a comfort, or a listening ear. Harry leaned back in his armchair, his fingers lightly brushing the Marauder's map on his lap. It's almost like it's protecting something, not in a dangerous way, in a kind way, like it's letting memories settle softly. Later that week, the trio returned to the room. The door opened for them now without a sound. The air was still, and the clock sat quietly, its hands unmoving. The room wasn't cold, but it carried the hush of a library at night, sacred, thoughtful, listening. Hermione placed her hand gently on the frame. What if we brought something of our own, she whispered. Ron blinked. Like, what? She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. It was the three of them, first year, just after their very first Halloween. Her eyes twinkled. A memory, one that means something. Harry followed suit, drawing out a small, folded parchment. The last note Sirius had written him before. Everything. His heart ached gently, not sharply. The note was worn, but the ink remained bold. Ron hesitated, then placed a Chudley Cannon's badge beside the photo and note. "It's the one Fred gave me when we won the house match. He told me I finally didn't mess something up." The moment the items touched the wooden base of the clock, the room grew warmer, not physically, but emotionally. The air shimmered faintly. The softest click echoed, followed by a chime, low, resonant, like the toll of understanding. Then the hands moved, not backwards, not forwards, but in slow, swaying circles, as if caught in the middle of remembering and forgetting. The room changed once more. They weren't transported this time. Instead, the walls faded like mist, revealing other echoes. A boy in Ravenclaw robes, pacing nervously, reading a letter again and again. A girl in Hufflepuff colors, leaving behind a sketchbook on the window ledge with trembling fingers. A professor placing a feather quill at the foot of the clock and quietly bowing his head. Each vision lasted no more than a few breaths, but each carried with it the distinct echo of something important. Unspoken, but cherished, the room was not just a sanctuary. It was a gathering place for memories that could no longer be held elsewhere. When the visions faded, silence fell again. Hermione's voice trembled slightly, though not from fear. "This room, it's sacred." They left the objects where they were, now part of the clock's story. In the following days, the trio noticed something unusual. The hallway outside the clock room was changing, not visibly, but atmospherically. Students walking past spoke softer near the door. Peeves, usually boisterous and disruptive, floated past without causing chaos. Even Filch, grumbling as he was, never entered. It was as if the room's quiet reverence was reaching beyond its walls. But something else was happening too. Something subtler. Harry began dreaming of the clock, not in vivid flashes, but soft impressions. The ticking sound would echo through his sleep, gently syncing with the rhythm of his breath. He would feel the weight of old memories press around him, not painful ones, but fragments of moments long gone. A smile from Lupin, a word from Dumbledore, a hug from Hagrid. He awoke not with dread, but with a heaviness that was oddly comforting, like revisiting a long-lost home for just a moment. Hermione, too, began noticing echoes in other places. A mirror in the charms corridor briefly reflecting her younger self. A tapestry that changed ever so slightly when she passed. A nod, a glance from one of the woven figures. Ron found himself speaking out loud when he was alone, especially near the clock. Not to anyone, just thoughts, stories, short, gentle memories. And sometimes, when he paused, he swore he heard a second breath in the room, listening. Then, one evening, as they approached the clock room again, they noticed something new, a fourth object on the base of the clock. None of them had placed it there. It was a golden snitch, old, its wings slightly frayed, resting quietly beside their belongings. It hadn't been there before, and no one had entered. Harry touched it gently, and a tiny silver thread shimmered in the air, a soft memory of a match long past. Not his, not anyone he knew, just a feeling, excitement, wind in the hair, a crowd's gentle roar, a wish to hold on to time just a little longer. The clock had begun, listening to others. Somehow, wordless and unseen, others at Hogwarts were finding their way to the room, not to solve a mystery, not to break a curse, but to be heard, to feel. It's become something bigger than us, Hermione whispered. And yet, the clock still ticked just for them when they entered, still listened just a little more closely, still remembered their names. The story had shifted now from mystery to meaning, and though they had no idea what would come next, there was no fear, only quiet anticipation. Because now they understood. The clock wasn't broken, it wasn't stuck, it wasn't cursed. It was waiting, and now it had begun to speak, not with words, but with echoes, echoes of time and of hearts that never truly let go. The hush that lingered around the mysterious clock was beginning to spread, not as a curse or spell, but like a whispered invitation. Word had not officially traveled among the students of Hogwarts, yet something deeper than rumor had begun to stir. A gentle pull, almost like instinct, drew a few curious hearts to the hallway where the old timepiece sat nestled behind its wooden door. For Harry, Hermione, and Ron, the journey was becoming less about solving a mystery and more about understanding what the room meant. And as the trio continued to visit, they found the space beginning to shift again, not with magic that dazzled or alarmed, but with subtler signs. There were more objects now on the base of the clock, a well-worn mitten, a broken wand tip, a prefect badge. None of them knew who had placed them there, and somehow that made them even more powerful. Hogwarts was remembering, not just through enchanted staircases or sentient paintings, but through this quiet little room that held emotions like lanterns in the dark. One evening, the three friends sat on the floor around the clock. The fire in the hearth glowed gently, although there was no wood. Hermione had brought parchment and ink, trying to note patterns. When the clock chimed, how the memories appeared, what emotions triggered the soft echoes. But Ron had a different idea. What if we just asked it something, he said, half joking, but not entirely. Asked it what? Harry asked, tilting his head. Ron shrugged. I don't know. What it wants, why it chose now to open. Hermione looked skeptical, but not dismissive. It's not sentient, at least not in the way we think, but it does seem aware. Harry leaned forward slightly. Maybe it's responding to us because of what we bring, what we remember. They all sat quietly for a moment. Then Hermione stood. She approached the base of the clock, and for the first time spoke aloud, not a spell, but a truth. I miss Professor McGonagall. The clock did not chime. The room didn't shift, but the air felt warmer, as though the walls themselves understood the weight of what she'd said. I miss Fred, Ron added softly. Harry didn't speak for a long while. When he did, his voice was low, nearly a whisper. I miss who we used to be, before everything. No illusions followed, no glowing visions, but all three felt lighter, as if the room had taken those thoughts, not to remove them, but to carry them for a while. In the days that followed, each of them chose their own way of engaging with the clock's mystery. Hermione, ever the seeker of knowledge, returned with questions, not written ones, but internal ones. She brought old books and read softly to the clock, tales of kindness, stories of sacrifice. She began to suspect that the clock responded most to authenticity, not cleverness. One night, she left behind her prefect schedule from 5th year, still annotated in precise ink. Because this, she said softly, was the last time I felt like I had control. Ron, surprisingly, grew quiet in the clock's presence. He didn't joke or fidget. Instead, he simply sat, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. Once he brought a chess piece, the knight from the life-sized game they'd played in their first year, and placed it gently on the base. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The clock ticked once, low and slow, and the fire flickered as if in approval. Harry, meanwhile, began to explore the emotional echoes more deeply. Each time he entered, he tried to connect, not by asking questions, but by offering stillness. In return, the room offered glimpses. Once he saw the girl again, the one from the very first vision. She was writing this time, hunched over a parchment, her quill trembling as tears fell questingly on the page. Harry didn't move, didn't speak, but he felt her sadness like it was his own. The moment passed, but its imprint lingered in his chest long after. Eventually, each of them came to the same conclusion, spoken aloud one late evening as rain tapped gently on the castle windows. "It's not about unlocking a secret," Hermione said. "It's about being willing to feel one," Ron added. Harry nodded slowly, "and being brave enough to leave a part of yourself behind." They had all made choices, not dramatic ones, but meaningful ones, to approach the clock with gentleness, to let go of the need to fix or control, to listen without demanding. And Hogwarts, in return, had responded, not with grandeur, but with grace. On the 7th day since their first visit, the room looked subtly different. There were now cushions arranged in a gentle semicircle, as if inviting company. The walls held more light, though no torches burned, and the hands of the clock, once frozen, now moved in slow, deliberate arcs, not marking time in hours or minutes, but in feelings, comfort, memory, healing. The Marauders' map still showed nothing in that space, but they no longer needed it to. Some places in Hogwarts, they now understood, existed outside the lines, held not by enchantments, but by emotion. The choice to believe that mattered was entirely their own. The moonlight that evening draped the castle in a velvet hush, as though Hogwarts itself had drawn a soft blanket over its dreaming towers. Harry, Hermione, and Ron walked together down the corridor that led to the room of the clock, the same gentle hallway they'd tread so many nights before. But tonight, something in the air felt just a touch warmer, like the castle was holding its breath, or perhaps letting out a sigh. Inside the room, the ticking was softer than ever. The fire danced in muted gold, and the old Quidditch banners on the wall swayed as if touched by wind that wasn't there. But what drew their eyes What pulled them toward the center of the room was the clock itself. It was glowing, not brightly, not in any way that startled, just a soft, slow pulse, like the heartbeat of something ancient and finally at peace. Hermione whispered first, "It's alive." "Has it ever done that before?" Ron asked, his voice almost childlike. Harry shook his head. "No, not like this." Then, just as the room seemed to still completely, the hands of the clock began to move, not quickly, not urgently, but in a slow, spiral pattern, looping backward, not by minutes or hours, but in emotions, warmth, joy, longing. The gears turned with purpose but without haste. Then it happened. A light shimmered in the air above the fireplace, soft as a memory, delicate as starlight, and in that shimmer, a scene began to unfold. It wasn't a dramatic vision or a magical projection. It was quiet, almost like a dream they were being gently allowed to share. The great hall came into view, but not as they knew it now. The floor was polished with candlelight, and long-forgotten house banners lined the walls in colors that no longer matched the modern hues. There were students gathered around a table, laughing softly, sharing notes, nudging each other with feathered quills. It was a quieter Hogwarts, older, calmer. In the center of the group was a young girl, bright-eyed and curly-haired, her hands wrapped around a small wooden model of a broomstick. She turned it in her palms like it was the most precious thing in the world. Her voice was clear as bells, and somehow they could all hear it. "One day they'll remember me, not for spells or tests, but for the joy I shared." She laughed, and the sound was so gentle it made Ron smile without realizing it. Then the vision shifted. The girl was older, now a teacher, robes dusted with chalk, her fingers ink-stained. She was designing something, a clock with dozens of tiny gears and runes etched around its face. She whispered as she worked, "Time cannot stop memories. It only carries them gently for those brave enough to look." And then one final shift. She stood in the very room Harry, Ron, and Hermione were standing in, now furnished with soft chairs and old Quidditch posters. She placed the clock on the mantel. Her face was older, but peaceful, like someone who had lived and loved fully. "I hope they come here," she said aloud. "I hope they come not to chase time, but to sit with it." The vision faded, the shimmer settling back into the air like dust caught in late sunlight. The room was quiet again, but the quiet wasn't empty. It was full of warmth, of understanding, of something that needed no explanation. Hermione sat down slowly. "It was her," she said softly, "the one who built this place. She made this clock," Harry murmured, "to preserve something?" Ron nodded slowly. "To keep joy alive, maybe to help people remember what really matters." Hermione touched the base of the clock, running her fingers across a small plaque they hadn't noticed before. The engraving was simple. "For those who remember joy, time is never truly lost." Professor Calla Whitlow. They were silent for a long while. No one rushed to speak. No one needed to. Eventually, Hermione leaned back against a cushion. She didn't want to change time. She wanted us to feel it, to share in it. Harry closed his eyes. She built a memory that could hold others safely, a loop of peace, like a bedtime story that never quite ends. Ron chuckled gently. A Quidditch match that plays over and over because it made her happy. Hermione smiled, and now it makes us happy too. The room was no longer a mystery to be solved. It was a gift to be understood, a gentle place built not with power or prestige, but with quiet magic, the kind that holds on to laughter, friendship, and light-hearted competition, the kind that never fades. Harry stood and looked at the clock one more time. Its hands had stopped again, but not in the same place. They now pointed to a moment that couldn't be defined by hours or days. They pointed to peace. As they left the room that evening, none of them felt the need to return tomorrow. They would, perhaps, but not because they had to, because they wanted to, because somewhere deep inside, they knew that some parts of Hogwarts were never meant to be fully understood, only cherished, and the clock would be there, waiting, not to count time, but to hold it. The corridor outside the room of the clock felt just a little warmer that night, as if the castle itself had softened its breath. The trio walked in silence, letting the quiet stretch between them, not as a gap, but as a gentle thread of shared understanding. There was no need to speak. The images from the room still lingered, Professor Calla Whitlow's kind eyes, her laughter like candlelight, and that final soft whisper of memory, a gift wrapped in time, preserved not in spells, but in the quiet joy of a moment never forgotten. Outside, the halls of Hogwarts slumbered under moonlight. The portraits had closed their eyes, the suits of armor had stopped creaking, and even Peeves seemed to have found a place to rest. The castle was dreaming. They returned to the Gryffindor common room, where the fire had shrunk into glowing coals, painting the walls with a cozy amber hue. Crookshanks was curled by the hearth, one ear twitching as if halfway through a magical dream of his own. Ron sank into his favorite armchair, letting out a long, contented breath. That was different, he said, not needing to say more. Hermione smiled gently as she curled up with a blanket, her eyes soft and thoughtful. Not every mystery needs solving. Some just need witnessing. Harry moved to the window, resting his forehead gently against the cool glass. The Quidditch pitch glowed faintly under the moonlight. For a fleeting second, he thought he saw movement, two brooms chasing one another, playful and light, vanishing into mist. "Do you think it'll still be playing?" he asked quietly. Hermione looked up. "The match? Probably. I think that's the point." Ron grinned. "Then it's never over. That's kind of perfect, isn't it?" They sat together in a silence that wasn't empty, but full of shared warmth, of quiet magic, of something eternal. Somewhere in the castle, a soft tick echoed through ancient stone. Time was still moving, but for once, it wasn't rushing. It wasn't pulling them forward. It was simply keeping them company. Harry closed his eyes. His heartbeat slowed, steady and calm. He wasn't thinking of tomorrow or of anything that needed fixing. Just the glow of fire, the hush of the halls, and the echo of a match that would replay itself again and again, because joy like that was never meant to be lost. In a few minutes, they would head upstairs, pull warm quilts over tired shoulders, drift into dreams. But for now, they stayed where they were, together, quiet, safe, surrounded by the gentle pulse of a castle that remembered joy. And in the soft stillness of the common room, where time no longer chased them, they allowed peace to settle like snowfall on a still lake. The Gryffindor dormitory was quiet now. Moonlight slipped softly through the tall, arched window, silvering the floor and the bedposts in its path. The castle breathed in silence, each stone and beam seemingly hushed, as if listening to the dreams of its students. Harry lay curled under his blanket, the enchanted journal resting on the table beside him, its pages now still but warm. He had tucked it close, almost instinctively, as if part of him feared it would vanish like a dream come morning. But it didn't. It remained, quietly glowing, a whisper of the past resting beside him like a sleeping memory. The canopy above his bed shimmered faintly in the moonlight. He stared at it for a while, eyes heavy, lids fluttering. His thoughts wandered to the room of the clock, the ticking hands, the sound of wind over brooms, and laughter echoing like the voice of a ghost that was never sad. Downstairs, the fire had faded completely. The portraits in the common room dozed gently, their frames golden in the dim night. Even the fat lady had fallen into slumber, her soft snores barely audible behind her canvas curtain. Outside, the castle's towers stood against the stars like protectors. The forbidden forest rustled only slightly, its creatures wrapped in their own hush, and high in the sky, stars blinked slowly, as if watching over all those below with patient calm. The enchanted Quidditch match still played, somewhere within the heart of the room of the clock, evergreen in its memory, untouched by loss or change. A gift not just to Professor Whitlow, but to all who needed to remember what happiness once felt like and how it could still return, if only for a while. And as sleep gently took Harry, he smiled faintly. In a castle filled with mysteries and wonders, he had found something different tonight. Not a solution, not a lesson, but a quiet promise that Hogwarts remembered joy, that some magic, like laughter, like friendship, like a perfect goal at the last second, was never meant to end. It only waited, patiently, to be felt again. And with that thought, Harry drifted softly into dreams, the castle cradling him in moonlight and memory, safe, at peace, home.